I welcome all of you to this online workshop on safe trade and food safety amid COVID-19. As some of you already know that this online workshop is a part of our SETI program, in which we continue to collaborate with Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development, BITAD. And we're really grateful to the leadership at BITAD for undertaking this first of its kind exercise during the pandemic days and giving an orientation around this subject. Just by way of welcoming and setting the stage, we do understand that after the COVID-19 outbreak, due attention is being given in several countries to ensure hygiene and safe transportation, port handling, storage and warehousing of cargo. We also understand that international bodies, including those under the UN umbrella, have been looking at this, and new consignment handling procedures would be discussed in the coming days. The safety of people involved in the logistics and supply chain has been a key concern in the emerging literature. So in view of this background, our session today would aim to cover three aspects of this subject. First, appropriate biosecurity arrangements requiring changes to our crops, livestock, and how food is produced, consumed, and distributed. And as Dr. Ali Abbas Qazilbash was just saying, that many of the things may be just the same. It's just the institutional strengthening that may be required around them. But then we would also like to see, as a second, the COVID-19 related sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, and if anything has changed or is due to change in near future as the pandemic prolongs. We also will touch upon the third aspect, which is how do we minimize the food loss and waste on account of compromised trade consignments or speeding up border checks, which many of the private sector stakeholders are informing us that the border checks are really leading to time delays and, of course, cost overruns. Now, one of the outcomes, expected outcomes of today's discussion that we'll have is to communicate the importance of safe trade, but also to motivate a discussion around the capacities desired in relevant institutions to understand the new and emerging rules of agriculture and livestock trade. Today's session received inputs, guidance, and advice from the Director General BITAD, Ms. Rahila Tajwar Sahiba. I'm really grateful to her. Also to Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, and Mr. Qasim Shah, the Deputy Executive Director of SDPI. So grateful to all three of you for your inputs and advice on putting this together. Now, before I hand over to DG Sahiba for her opening remarks, let me introduce our guest speaker for today, who is very kind to accept this invite at a very short notice and agreed to educate us on this subject. Our guest speaker for today is Dr. Ali Abbas Qazilbash. He has a PhD in biotechnology, an MPhil in microbiology, and an experience spanning 24 years where he has extensively worked with numerous reputed organizations, including the government of Pakistan, UNIDO, European Union, DFID, USAID, and various other entities under the UN umbrella. His work revolved around quality infrastructure, accreditation, testing, and metrology, addressing technical barriers to trade, and SPS compliance with a focus on food safety, public health, and trade development. As part of his recent work with UNIDO, he has served in Pakistan, Egypt, Sudan, and Kenya. His achievements in Pakistan include accreditation of 39 testing calibration laboratories, establishment of national proficiency testing scheme and accreditation, certification inspection bodies, development and implementation of national quality policy and technical regulation regime, establishment of and design of national, regional, provincial food safety authorities, developing food safety regulations, developing the capacity of federal seed certification and registration department, training of food safety inspectors at federal and provincial level, development of codes of practice for identified critical control points along the supply chains of agro-based products, including mangoes and citrus. Some of our colleagues from Commerce and Trade cadre would know him for his excellent work and service at the Trade-Related Technical Assistance Program. So with this introduction, which certainly in the interest of time, of course, this doesn't do justice with his wide experience. However, we'd like to take forward the proceedings for today. And I would now invite Madam Rahila Tajwar Saiba, the Director General of BITAD, for her welcome remarks. She's a very senior civil servant. She's the senior most civil servant at the moment in the Commerce and Trade Service of the Government of Pakistan. She has previously served at various positions in Ministry of Commerce, Prime Minister's Secretariat, DDAP, and various other government bodies. So it's in fact out of her vision and drive around this subject, around new areas in COVID and trade literature, that we are hosting this dialogue. She motivated us to move in this direction. Really grateful to you, madam, and look forward to your welcome remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Waqar. Honorable Dr. Ali Abbas Qazalbash, Dr. Waqar Ahmed and SDPI team and BTED faculty, my dear probationary officer, a very good welcome to the seminar. We extend, all of my team extends its gratitude to Waqar Ahmed and SDPI for arranging such an important and relevant learning session for our officers. It will not only help us, our officers, and of course for us, about latest best practices in international trade, which are compliant with COVID-19, but also cement understanding of revised SPS measures in times of pandemics. Actually, COVID-19 is such a new phenomenon that nobody is still in a phase of understanding the whole phenomena, what is happening, what will happen, especially with the health issues, especially with the phytosanitary sanitary laws, and especially with the safeties attached with the hygiene and about the fresh food and vegetable exports. So this seminar, I hope, will give at least a basic idea that how our probationary officers, when they will go in a field, they would be able to handle such issues such as sanitary and phytosanitary laws. Although we have full agreement under the WTO understanding of the phytosanitary and sanitary laws, but still when new realities comes, so we need to update ourselves. So BTED is, with the help of Dr. Waqar, we are in such a, I would say, we are lucky that we are having Dr. Ali Qazalbash, because this pandemic has forced countries to rethink and revise the hygiene and safety measures for transportation, port and consignment handling, storage and warehousing of cargo. Safety of citizens in general and workers directly associated and involved in the procedure just mentioned in a few of the supply chain management. But I'll just wrap it as early as possible. I'm sure that this session will be to acquaint our officers with the appropriate biosecurity arrangements with regard to production, consumption, and distribution of crops, livestock, and other food items. Because food is the basic thing we consume, and it ultimately uh, mm, metabolize in various kind of uh, positive metabolism and negative metabolism as well. It is also expected that this session will bring home to the offices the latest COVID-19 related sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, minimizing food loss and waste of an on account of compromised trade consignment, speeding up border checks, and the capacity required in national institution to understand the above mentioned measures and their proper implementation with support of private sector and other partners. In the end, PTI again extend its gratitude to the team SDIP, especially Dr. Vakar and his team, and we are really thankful to have such a source who is really working in this field for a long period of time. And I really appreciate, because when I see the CV of Dr. Kazalbash, it's really appreciable that he is such an expert and he's among us with our students to share his knowledge, his experiences, and our probationers will definitely be benefited from his experience and expertise. I know this session is very small, but still you have 2 hours almost. 1 o'clock is the deadline, but you can go on if you want further. But we can arrange more lectures on this later on with the help of Dr. Vakar, because if there is a desire for more knowledge from the students, from the probationary officers, we can arrange more seminars on this. So with these remarks, I welcome Dr. Kazabash to start his interaction with the probationers, and thank you very much for to be with us.
Thank you, Madam, for your very comprehensive remarks and for agenda setting. And as you said, without ado, we will go straight to Dr. Kazalbash. Dr. Sir, you have the screen if you'd like to share the presentation. And in terms of the timekeeping, as you said, we could take around 40-45 minutes as per your convenience, followed by Q&A for our officers who are joining us. Once the Q&A starts, you have the facility to raise your hands. You can click the raise hand option, and we could then start taking the questions or comments that you would have. So it's over to Dr. Kazalbash.
Thank you, DG Saiba. Just on the outset, I'd like to say that I've worked quite a bit with PITAD from 2005 till 2015 under the, as Dr. Vakar mentioned, the Trade-Related Technical Assistance Program, and much appreciate your evolution from the basement of some building in Blue Area to a very comprehensive, purposeful structure in H8. So thank you very much for your kind words. Now, as time is short, and as mentioned by the DG as well as Dr. Vakar, that there's a lot to be said regarding trade, regarding technical barriers to trade, regarding sanitary, phytosanitary compliance, and then of course, dovetailing it or addressing the COVID-19 issues. But let me point out one key aspect is that although, of course, it's a pandemic and it's taken many lives and it is still evolving and we're still trying to grapple with how to control it, the fundamental requirements for trade have not really changed. And before I go into the presentation, I'd just like to give you like 3 examples. Today, EU has put a ban or restrictions on sesame being exported from India. Why? Because of pesticide residue. That has nothing to do with COVID-19. Today, EU has put restrictions on sesame from Sudan. Why? Because of salmonella in their consignments. Today, there are restrictions for French beans and other fresh fruits and vegetables from Kenya to the EU because of pesticide residues. So the compliance requirements have not fundamentally changed when it comes to exports or when it comes to market requirements. They stay the same. Of course, the controls may have been affected by COVID-19 in the sense that movement of inspectors or restricted supplies may result in compromised consignments, but the requirements in terms of compliance measures, certification, testing, inspection remain the same. So my presentation is a little protracted in nature, and I'll try to speed through it. We'll try to go through it and identify key things that at least should be brought to your attention. But as the DG Saiba said, that if you want further information, of course, SDPI has my contacts, and for more detailed discussions or webinars, we can hold a follow-up if needed. But, oh shoot, how do I move forward? Oh, sorry, okay. So the key aspects, I just mentioned, are despite the COVID, nothing substantive has changed when it comes to TBT-SPS food safety compliance for trade. Countries will need to comply with the trade agreements set up under the WTO TBT and SPS arrangements. For the agri-sector, this means using what is key is a risk-based approach backed by scientific evidence and robust traceability system. These 3 aspects are what is fundamentally missing in all developing countries. Pakistan is not unique to this. Now, when I say is missing, it may not be, I mean by that it's not up to the mark. There may be some things that are product-based, but they're not hazard-based. You see, we need to identify the risk based on the hazard, not on the product. And we are skewed right now and looking at product rather than looking at the hazard. So that needs to be looked into as well. And as I said, it's not unique for Pakistan. Legislation and technical regulations need to be in line with best international practices and linked to what OIE, the Organization for Animal Health, IPPC, the International Plant Protection Convention, and Codex Alimentarius state. So one is OIE is the animal health, IPPC is the plant health, and Codex Alimentarius is food safety. I don't think this is unknown to you. So as I said, I'll just quickly go through. What COVID has actually impacted is the global supply chain. Because let's say an end product is being manufactured in a third country, but they source from a second and first country. And that's where the supply chain is being impacted because of COVID, either if they use, at the harvest level, where they use migrant workers who can't, of course, come across borders or can't reach the place because of COVID, or within the country itself, there's the workforce can't be mobilized in time to harvest the product, or of course then transporters, storagers, so on and so forth across the supply chain are diminished in their capacity due to their restrictive movements. Now, the private sector, when it comes to processing and production, they still have to comply with the minimum. Now, what I've mentioned here when it comes to FSSC 22000, which is Food Safety and Security Certification, and good hygiene practice and good manufacturing practice. These are the basics. We also have the British Retail Consortium, and we have other private standards that may need to be addressed depending upon market requirements. And of course, there has to be the proof of compliance as well to these specific standards or regulations. Then the freight forwarders and transporters, they need to implement good hygiene practice, and they need to show some sort of a control. So when it comes to, a consignment of let's say, mangoes from Pakistan, we export fresh mangoes from Pakistan. We put them in okay, everything is done well and good. At the end, we have to treat it with hot water to control the fruit fly. There is a mix in batches, because not every farmer can produce the requisite amount to be exported. So it's a collation of all the harvest put together. And if it's not gone through the proper process, or there has been a weakness in the control, the consignment is put in the container with compliant mango and non-compliant mango, reaches its destination, you open it, and literally the fruit fly is seen flying out from there. That container is closed and put away and destroyed. Now, what the freight forwarders need to do is to fumigate their container with permissible pesticides, and then, of course, allow that pesticide to take its effect, give it time so that the residue level of that pesticide within the container is at permissible levels, and then pack it with the consignment. I mean, this is a very simplistic way of explaining the process. And the last thing is, we need to minimize human contact and strengthen transparency. And that is like through electronic certification. I mean, we do have a system, but it's not addressing the non-tariff barriers. It's not really addressing robustly or vigorously the SPS compliance. Again, if I would use an example, I'm sorry, I'm still on my first slide, but if I use an example, right now the WEBOC, at least, I wouldn't say right now, but the WEBOC system when I visited it had a red, amber, and green light for consignments of agro-based origin. And they had a red light for betel nut coming from Indonesia. So it was product-based, not hazard-based, because they had been told that there is aflatoxin in the betel nut. So they would stop all the consignments and get them tested. Instead, they should be hazard-based and look at aflatoxin and then see which of the consignments have a high risk of getting aflatoxin in it. It's not just betel nut, there's a whole slew of products. So anyhow, so it has to be sort of aligned with hazards rather than product. And this electronic certification I will discuss a little later, because this is also very key, and Pakistan should take advantage of the current situation, particularly with the CPEC and its involvement in CAREC, the Central Asian Republic economic countries, of which Pakistan and Afghanistan have been added to the 9 that are there, and take advantage of the funds that are there and the procedures that they're using. Oh, hang on, how do I move forward? Oh, okay, I just pressed this. Okay, so the supply chain, again, just quickly going through, we have the production at farm level. So that's planting and harvesting. So there is such a thing as good agricultural practice and integrated pest management, and mainly encompassed by what the certification is, global GAP. This is, of course, voluntary, not mandatory. But when it comes to the market requirements, the buyer requires or would prefer the product be sourced from a global GAP certified farm, which ensures quality and high yield. Post-harvest is where most countries developing in nature face their difficulty in terms of the losses they face. And it's currently it's upwards of 60% depending on the product. When you talk about fisheries, it's nearly 60%. When you talk about fruit and vegetables, it could be anywhere between 40 to 60%, depending again on the product. And then transportation. Now, transportations are, of course, two levels. There's at the farm to the pack house, and of course, from the pack house itself to the seaport or to the export destination, depending upon whether it's a road transportation, air freighted, or shipped out. Processing, of course, the inputs are important. So what we refer to as a sustainable supplier development program. This has been initiated by GFSI, that's the Global Food Safety Initiative. It's a World Bank UNIDO sort of program, which is more focused on private sector. It helps the private sector address food safety requirements and brings them together annually in meetings to discuss the challenges that they face. They do involve, to a lesser extent, the regulatory bodies as well, so public sector bodies, but those are the ones that are linked to sanitary, phytosanitary regulations. Exports, of course, they have to, the other thing about exports is, of course, they need to, the export product or the producer needs to align their regulations or harmonize their regulations with those TBT and SPS measures that the market requires. So at the regional level and the global level, there may be slight differences, but the basics are all the same. And of course, it's all well and good to say that we are compliant, but of course we're all human beings and distrust is a major part of it. So the only way to have a trusted supply chain is to give proof of compliance. So that means inspection and certification from a credible conformity assessment body, that's CAB, and accredited testing services. I think I'll skip through this. We all know tariffs are going down, NTBs are going up, except in the case of what was happening in the White House. He was trying to increase tariffs, but I mean, that's a different subject matter. So because the non-tariff barriers are actually linked with quality and safety. And again, here, if we look at it, the non-tariff measures, we would focus on the technical barriers to trade and the sanitary, phytosanitary measures rather than the others. These are the technical measures again. So SPS requirements, again, I'm sorry if some things that I've mentioned are already known to you, so I don't exactly know the level of your knowledge, albeit it'll be probably great. And I'm just humbled. I'm just a facilitator here. I'd like to learn from you as well. But just to quickly recap, SPS requirements, that's a key precondition for exports. I don't really like that term too much because, of course, everything is driven economically. So we're trying to make, we're trying to be part of the global trade regime. Every country wants to generate foreign income and increase its revenues. But for me, SPS requirement is mandatory for even domestic trade. I'm sure you would like to eat food that is safe for human consumption, for your own consumption. So, I mean, although it is related to exports and trade, it should be part of our daily life. How we treat the food when it comes into our kitchen and how we prepare it should be equally controlled in terms of to ensure safety for the consumption of foods of either, of course, the elderly or the children who are the most vulnerable. So WTO TBT agreement compliances are products sourced from areas that are free of pests and disease. So that sort of is linked with good agricultural practice and integrated pest management. So we're trying to use less chemicals and use more biological controls. Fruit and vegetables minimum pesticide residue standard. Of course, if we have no choice but to use pesticides, we have to use the correct one, and then we have to use the correct dose and spray it at the correct time to ensure the minimum residue levels are left within the product. Meats and fish, particularly meat and fish, of course, if it's aquaculture, they should have minimum antibiotic residue requirement. There is a withdrawal period, of the antibiotic in this animal, whatever the animal is, a small or large ruminant, or even the poultry. And prior to slaughter, there should be controls there to ensure that that antibiotic residue limit has, the antibiotic has left the system, or is at such a level that it's not harmful for human consumption. Of course, standards of hygiene applied to manufacturing, that's HACCP, and what ISO 22000 or FSSC 22000 more or less is a culmination of these two. First, they had HACCP, which is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, something that, by the way, for information, was actually developed by NASA for its astronauts. Because I'm telling you, you don't want to get sick when you're in space in a suit that is very confined. So they developed this procedure, which of course was coined the term HACCP. And of course, the statement in red is universal for developing countries. They lack of implementation capacity. We have the rules and regulations. Some of them are old, some of them are new, but our implementation and control enforcement is what is really weak. I don't know. I think I'll skip through all of this. We all know we have to be competitive, we have to conform, and we have to connect to markets. This is basically a UNIDO slogan. And UNIDO really tries to help its client countries or its developing countries to address this. And the benefits of quality, of course, accuracy, predictability, governance, compliance, and comparability. These are all known. For metrology is, of course, the science of measurement and calibration, has to be accurate. Quality, hygiene management, standardization, conformity assessment, which is, of course, testing and inspection, and, of course, international accreditation. Sorry. Oops, I really don't know. Oh, okay. So if we were just to focus on phytosanitary measures, we're looking at, it's a control activity undertaken by government to ensure food safety or to protect animal and plant health. And it's governed by WTO SPS agreement. And what is key here, that SPS measures are concerned with regulatory acts and enforcement. And they are not concerned with voluntary schemes, advisory activities, support measures, training, and extension. The initiative considers only the SPS as a control system, this initiative. So the impacts of SPS non-compliance, what happens? It's obvious. If you look at the history of Pakistan as well, when it comes to fisheries, from 2005, the then Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock put a self-imposed ban of exports of fisheries to the EU because of sanitary conditions. If one goes to the fish harbor at the West Wharf in Karachi, one would realize why. What happened then is that the DG Sanko, which is the Director General for Consumer Protection in the EU, asked the Food and Veterinary Office of its branch to go and visit Pakistan in 2007 to see if the competent authority, which is when it regards to fisheries, is the Marine Fisheries Department, is actually doing what it had promised to do after it had imposed the self-ban. It found out that most of the stuff that they had done, although they were complying with it, was only partially fulfilled. Therefore, what they did was they delisted the fish processing plants located in the West Wharf, which were about 10 in nature that were authorized to export to the EU. So 10 processing plants could not export anymore to the EU. At that point in time, the revenue that was around $50 million annually of fish exports to the EU. Of course, one may argue that the fish exports were not hindered because China, took all our fish and wasn't really too stringent on its requirements. But we had lost the EU in terms of fisheries. And if you multiply, and we then, through the interventions of UNIDO under the Trade-Related Technical Assistance Part 2 project, and the request of Ministry of then Food Security and Research, and of course the EU that was funding this project, they said, please, let's open up this market and get our fisheries product back into the EU. It took 7 years, well, 6 years, okay. 2007 till 2013, March 2013 is when finally the EU allowed 2 processors from Karachi to the West Wharf to export fisheries to the EU. So if you multiply 50 by 6, 7, that's $300 million plus lost to a market that was there already. And then re-entering the market, we only have 2 right now. The Marine Fisheries Department is trying to get a couple of more enlisted, but it's not possible because the controls are not tight enough. So what is it? The business operator impacts, direct loss for exporter, loss of customers. And then sectoral impacts is the loss of access to the market, you get a ban, loss of buyer confidence, so you get discounted prices. As we sell the fish, I mean, some of our shrimp are really good, but we get them, we have to sell them cheaper because of the compliance issues and increased investor risk for improvements. So no one's willing to put more money in knowing that the controls are weak and they won't be able to recover their money. So if I look at the problem tree, if I would extrapolate from that, if we look in the middle, it's a non-compliant product consigned to the market. So there's threats to human and animal life, weak quality and safety management, and loss of markets. But what feeds into it are these SPS management controls. We have failure of official control system, and we have ineffective inspection and enforcement, and ineffective laboratories, although the laboratories now are much better in nature. Now, I don't know, Dr. Vikas, should I just skip through here, or do you want me to? I'm
yes,
not boring.
No, I think we can move to the next section. Yes, certainly. I think this is very relevant. Thank you.
So we continue with this? Is that what you're trying to say?
Okay. Yes, please.
So within the international SPS policy and framework, countries require the imports to be, of course, compliant to their national SPS regulations. They're more or less the same. Depending on market requirements, the levels may differ. Again, just a quick example, arsenic in rice was a big issue coming from, of course, the subcontinent, where arsenic is prevalent in our groundwater, not only ours, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, even China. The World Health Organization set its standards at 2 milligrams per kg. EU, through its DG Sanko, said no. We, through its whatever scientific research that it said, we're lowering this limit to 0.2 milligrams per kg. So this was going to adversely impact our rice if we were not compliant. And as an individual product, I think we export around close to $2 billion annually of rice. Of course, not all of it goes to the EU, but as a whole. So that could have been impacted. What the project did, with the help of the Ministry of Agriculture and well, it was Food Security now, and of course some of the labs that are here that are accredited, we did a quick assessment of arsenic in rice in Pakistan in certain pocket areas where rice is grown, particularly southern Punjab, and we found that apart from two places, the rest were all compliant within the 0.2 milligrams per kg. So that saved us to a large extent. We even helped government of Pakistan to go to a Codex Alimentarius committee meeting, advocate this, and although there were only 2 people from Pakistan, which the project funded, there were 9 from India. So it goes to show what the importance, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to belittle Pakistani bureaucracy or anything, but I mean, in all honesty, they go there for fun and games and they don't go there for serious stuff. But anyhow, these 2 were from the ministry. One was DG, Department of Plant Protection, and the other one was a key person in the ministry addressing a technical person addressing a plant and animal food safety issues. So we were able to advocate, and our market remained open. So what are we looking at when it comes to SPS measures? We're looking at, as I just said, additives, contaminants, toxins, or disease-carrying organisms in food, beverages, and feedstuffs. And then, of course, there's zoonosis, which is, of course, COVID is a zoonotic disease, but it's not going into the food, luckily. It's just from an animal to a human being and from humans to humans now. Pests, disease, and disease-causing organisms. This comes under, of course, more of a plant health issue. Now, why is fruit fly such a major issue in when it comes to, let's say, mangoes? It is because, I'll tell you, EU has fruit flies, but they are worried that if a fruit fly comes from some other country, some other source, enters their ecological system, that fruit fly that has entered may be resistant to pesticides that they're using to control, or the control measures that they're using to control their pests, thereby introducing a more resistant strain and causing problems for them. It's not a food safety issue. The pesticide residue limits are, but a fruit fly in the mango is not going to kill you. Maybe add a little protein to your diet, but it's not going to kill you. Maybe spoil the taste of the mango. But it's the introduction of that pest in that environment which could cause ecological problems. So that's why they look at that. As I mentioned, damage caused by entry and establishment and spread of pests, including invasive species. So these are issues that they would like to put controls under. They, as in the whole global community, when it comes to importing products of agro-based nature, of course, edible products. Quickly going through these, trading with the EU, you have to comply with EU food safety laws. You have to comply with what FVO and border inspections say. When I visited a border checkpoint in London with a group of Pakistani delegates, I took them with me through that program that Dr. Waqar had mentioned. We were lucky enough to see at that point in time, there was a consignment of spices, red chilies coming in from India. 100% inspection, 100% testing. That product was taken for testing. Why? Aflatoxin. Aflatoxin, and then the dye. The dye, less so because more stringent measures were made, but aflatoxin. And it's directly linked to food safety and human health. So stringent controls there. So you can sell your product to these countries. They will then, of course, not pay premium price because there will be this added check put in place before it enters the market. And of course, there has to be a traceability system, which I think I mentioned or I will mention. So the challenges are the private sector standards may be more stringent than the public sector regulations. So like BRC. Now, if you want to sell your product to Marks and Spencer or Asda Walmart, when it comes to agro foods, their requirements are more stringent. I mean, our mangoes go into the wholesale market, and from there it's picked up by whoever wants to buy them. But unless there's these stringent measures, the high-end market will not purchase them and pay premium price for that. So we have stringent phytosanitary regulations, and we have then stringent food safety requirements when it comes to hygiene, MRLs, which is the maximum residue limit, and heavy metals that can be in the product. Similar is, of course, with the US. The challenges are the same. The compliance or the requirements may be different in terms of who is the regulatory authority there or the competent authority responsible for that. With the US, there are multiple agencies, which causes more of a problem than solves it. But such is life when you have to deal with countries that have the Food and Drug Authority, you have the USDA, then you have APHIS as well, which is the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. Okay, so what are the basic requirements when it comes to TBT food safety control management for facilitation of trade? As I mentioned first, harmonization. The national standards and technical regulations are not harmonized with those of trading partners. So this is a challenge that needs to be addressed, that has to be addressed. Equivalence agreements. There's no equivalence or mutual recognition agreements on conformity assessment protocols and procedures. So a test done in Pakistan would not probably be recognized by an importing country, let's say, for instance. Transparency. If Pakistan changes some of its regulatory rules and regulations or its laws, which are come under the TBT-SPS agreements, it has to notify the WTO and its trading partners that this is what's being done, and it is in parallel or it's harmonized with what is internationally required. So if you don't do that, that then causes, of course, more hindrances to trade. Then what's most important, in my opinion, is a robust traceability system from the proverbial farm to fork, which the EU really looks at. And the traceability system must be robust to enable the competent authority to recall non-compliant product and to accurately address non-compliance. I mean, the traceability system is not there to address products that are compliant, but it's there to address products when there's a non-compliance, to then be able to recall the product from the shelf or from the port where it's of export or the port of destination, and then to accurately address non-compliance. If there is a farm, Ali Abbas farm, that is non-compliant, the traceability system must be able to identify that Ali Abbas farm is not using the correct pesticide or is not using proper post-harvest techniques, and it's the mango or whatever product that's come out from there is non-compliant. Please, let's put a stop of buying products from Ali Abbas's farm. The extension officers and the inspectors from the competent authority should visit my farm and tell me these are the things that I'm doing wrong, because at this date, on the 5th of July 2010, there was a product issue. You need to fix that now. So then I fix it. That's what a traceability system is supposed to do. A BAMARI traceability system is there, but it's weak. That's why I use the word robust. And certification. Sometimes consignments go through without the correct or with incomplete certification systems. And I'd like to address this at a later point during the presentation on how there is currently a scheme to reduce this non-compliance. So, food safety, we already talked about this. I think I'll skip this one. Basically, SPS controls food safety, animal health, and plant health. So, what is food safety? Assurance that food will not cause harm to the consumer when it's prepared or eaten according to the intended use. So food safety refers to those hazards, whether chronic or acute, that may make food injurious to the health. So it is not negotiable and always a subject to regulation, food safety. So when it's chronic or acute, so chronic would be heavy metal pesticides. Those are chronic because they accumulate in your system and they kill your liver and kidney later on. Acute is salmonella or Clostridium or toxins produced by them thereof. They are more immediate. Within eating, consuming that contaminated food, you get sick within 24 to 48 hours. And if there's not proper healthcare, or if you've got what is now known as underlying conditions, it may even be fatal. So therefore, it is non-negotiable and it's always regulated. Quality refers to other attributes of the product to which the consumer determined by the buyer and seller, and such that influence the product. So what you when I talk about quality, it's really reflected in the labeling, and it's a consumer protection measure. Labeling would be, let's say, in an end product, there are peanuts in it. So on the label, it should clearly say that this food potentially contains an allergen because people are allergic to it. So whether it's peanut or whatever, I mean, if it's an allergen, a known allergen, it should be labeled, it should be placed on the label so that the consumer, when buying it, is aware of it. So food safety is one of three linked areas addressed. Okay, this already mentioned. The others are, of course, plant health and animal health. Now, if I come to Pakistan quickly now, current situation in Pakistan, the thing that I've written in red doesn't exist anymore. That's why I put it in red. So it's no longer current in that sense. We have too many organizations. Just give me a second. My laptop's running down. Quickly put it charging. Oh, put it on charging. We have too many institutions that address the SPS measures and controls. We have, most of them reside within the Food Security and Research Ministry. So we have the Animal Husbandry Commissioner, which now, of course, should be termed, this is the old British colonial term, it should be now termed as the Chief Veterinary Officer. Then we have the Animal Quarantine Department, headquartered in Karachi, with their animal house there in Karachi. We have the National Veterinary Laboratory, which is headquartered, located in the NRC in Islamabad. We have the Department of Plant Protection, which is located in Karachi. And then we have Grain Quality Testing Lab, because they test grains. Of course, that's linked directly to sanitary, phytosanitary. And there are two of those, one in NARC Islamabad and one in SARC Karachi. Of course, something that really saddens me to say, we had this really good initiative set up by the government of Pakistan in 2007, after a World Bank and UNIDO report on SPS controls when it came to exports of agro-based products. The then Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock developed this project called National Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, NAFIS, which was to be the sanitary, phytosanitary focal point, and basically from it set up the regulations that governed animal health, plant health, and food safety. That, of course, no longer exists now, despite numerous efforts of trying to help it evolve. But that's another issue. Of course, then at the in our wisdom, when we devolved the ministries, we shifted what is the competent authority, the singular competent authority when it comes to a product of food, that's fish. The Marine Fisheries Department was shifted to the Ministry of Ports and Shipping. Why? Maybe you can answer that better than I. But I do understand that there was a summary, I think it's 2020, right? So I think 2018, 2019, there was a summary being moved in the ministries to push this back to Ministry of National Food Security and Research. I haven't been too updated on that, so I haven't really followed up. I don't know whether it's still there or it's at Ports and Shipping. Then, of course, at the Ministry of Science and Technology, we have what I refer to as, and you don't quote me on that because it'll get me in trouble, even though I was offered by the Ministry of Science and Technology to be DG of this Pakistan Standards and Quality Control Authority. I had to decline for personal reasons, but there is this Pakistan Standards and Quality Control Authority that, again, in the wisdom of the government of Pakistan and its regulations, possibly because there was this vacuum and they like to fill it in, they have set up standards which, by definition of WTO, are voluntary, but they've set up standards for 43 products, food products, ranging from oils to juices and things like that. But it's end product. It doesn't control downstream, the source. So there it is, and it has a conformity assessment department that goes and, sells its mark on food products. अगर आप जो भी food product लेंगे in the market, you will find I think it's now PSA tick mark on it. And it charges the private sector 0.5% or of its annual profits to put that mark on the product. So that's another issue. Then, of course, after devolution, we have these provincial governments, Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, Livestock, Dairy departments, and in some cases, fisheries departments as well when it comes to, well, yeah, I think all of them have them. I don't know if Balochistan has it or not. And then the provincial food safety agencies, which started off with the Punjab Food Authority, whom we helped, but when it came to setting up its regulations and training of its inspectors. Now, of course, we have KPK Food Authority, and we have a Balochistan Food Authority. Sindh Food Authority is I think it's on paper. I'm not sure whether it has been established. As I said, issues when it comes to current border controls. As I said, we need a risk-based approach. Border controls are of course, the mandate of the federal agency. Most protocols require testing and certification, and excessive time and costs are put at the exports. And the breach of SPS agreement of foreign operators exporting to Pakistan. And there's no appropriate, not risk-based approach. Some critical hazards are not even addressed, especially when it comes to food safety of imported foods. Now, what we would possibly like is a multidisciplinary team at the border to undertake all relevant SPS inspections, checks on the consignment, plant health, animal health, and food safety. I mean, this is the minimum that would be required. It'd be great if we have a system that is online, that is computer-based, whereby any person with some scientific background or some knowledge would not necessarily a plant health person or a vet or a food safety person, but any person would look at what is required in terms of the import or export of that product through a pop-up windows on the certifications that are linked to that. So what that would be the most appropriate, and classified and authorized border inspection posts. Those are what type of products, the origins, and the service level. Now, implementation of the controls have to be risk-based as the primary control method for both import and export of the country. And you can only release the consignment pending the results. So if they don't have the correct certifications linked to the product, it has to sit there until it can be released. Now, this is where you need to ensure that the paperwork is done. And if it's electronic in nature, it even speeds up the process. So the types of check are documentary for consistency. In other words, approve origin, so that all the consignments identify the identity, in other words, to confirm that the consignment is described. In other words, whether it's whatever the consignment is, mangoes, quinoa, rice, wheat, whatever it is, and physical measurements of the parameters. In other words, to check on the spot, if there's a box that's damaged, then that would be taken for a spot sampling and testing by the authorized lab. Okay, fine. We need, of course, facilities as well we need SPS infrastructure facilities at these border points. So we need chill and cold rooms. We need quarantine areas where live animals can be inspected. And we need, of course, sampling and testing facilities. Now, for spot checking. And then we need the verification of documents, certificates of compliance. And here, I would like to take one example of e-phyto certification. E-phyto certification is something that the STDF has initiated with the World Bank and has promoted with IPPC FAO to promote this idea of producing an electronic phytosanitary certificate in XML format. And this, what it does is basically reduces the chances of lost certificates, inaccuracy, and of course, manipulation of the certificate itself. And it consists of, this is at the global level, there's a central server called a hub to facilitate the transfer of electronic phytosanitary certificates from MPPOs. Those are the National Plant Protection organizations. So the Department of Plant Protection of Pakistan is Pakistan's NPPO. Either from or to their own national electronic system, or by using a generic system described below. That's the GENS, the generic system. So there's the hub, the GENS system. It's a web-based system that is used to generate these e-phyto certificates. So this certificate of phytosanitary plant health certificates. And it allows for harmonization. You see, in order to work, you need harmonization. Once you've got the harmonization down, then this can work. Why e-phyto? Countries are using it. Of course, you list them. Argentina, Chile, even Sri Lanka are going paperless now. It reduces non-compliant certificates. It eliminates ineffective paper process, which is labor intensive, reduces the reissuance. So if we've lost a paper certificate, it has to be reissued. So that's time wasting and costs money as well. Loss of commodities, waiting for clearance. So here it's sitting at the border waiting for clearance, but it doesn't have the certificate. The product loses its value because it gets rotten, because these products have a shelf life. Reduces industry claims for late deliveries or bad quality. And of course, it protects legitimate trade. So you protect it against fraudulent certificates and pest introduction. So this is basically the illustration of that. Now, why I introduced this is because STDF is working within the CARIC region to promote this e-phyto solution. STDF is a funding organization. The government of Pakistan could access seed money to start this off. This is something that Pakistan is very much involved in at the CARIC stage, and I think it should really take this forward. And it's people like you who could promote or push this through with the Ministry of Food Security. And 2014 में OIE came to conduct what they call a PVS, which is the Performance of Veterinary Services. This is the scheme of it. They did the first part, which is circled, the diagnosis part. And this is where we're stuck now. आगे हम चले नहीं हैं. ये report Ministry of Food Security के पास पड़ी हुई है. I know somewhat what's in that report, but it's a confidential report in the sense that it protects the country. But the OIE has funds, and it can get funds as well to address all the other aspects. So when it comes to a prescription, in other words, when it comes to addressing the gaps that the OIE report has highlighted, and it comes to the treatment. So we talk about the legislation, we talk about public-private partnerships, we talk about education and laboratories. And then, of course, once that's done, there is repeated visits through follow-up missions by the OIE. This is, I mean, the proverbial term, lead a horse to water. This horse has been sitting next to the water and refusing to drink. That horse has turned into a donkey, I think. Because, I mean, it's only so much we can advocate if the other side is not willing to take the baton and run with it. Then the national quality policy, I think I'll leave that for a later stage to discuss that. But there's a national quality policy as well that encompasses this. So we're open now. I'm sorry. As I said, there's a lot to discuss. I could discuss more.
Absolutely.
But I'm open for questions.
No, absolutely. I think there's wealth of knowledge in these slides. And of course, after your lecture, we will certainly circulate these slides. And in case there are any areas which require further clarification, people could take it bilaterally. So maybe we will collect a couple of questions in the first round and then go to Dr. Saab for his response, just in the interest of time, because if we go by the time, we have around 20 minutes left, and I want to leave maybe the last 2 or 3 minutes for concluding remarks as well. So I do see Umar Riaz Sahab, whose hand is up. Maybe we can start with Umar Sahab, and then if any of our other colleagues have questions, they can raise their hands and we can take them in that order. Umar Sahab, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
Sir, thank you very much for such an informative lecture. I have questions that I would like you to address. Sir, you have a level and the provincial level, various organizations and various ministries and the departments of the government are taking care of these SPS requirements, or if they're not taking care of, they are primarily responsible for the SPS, for the compliance with the SPS and TBT requirements. Sir, as we see that at the federal level, we have the Ministry of National Food Security and Research and Ministry of Science, Ministry of Science and Technology, and provincial government, provincial level, there are certain other departments. Sir, you at the end suggested a federal authority, a federal control authority, and we need to have an interplay between the different fields. And you also suggested a multidisciplinary team at the border. So my question to you is, do we have any constitutional bottleneck in play that is prohibiting us to establish a constitutional, a federal control authority? Because as we've seen that SPS primarily concerns the agricultural products, and after the 18th Amendment, the agriculture has been primarily devolved to the provinces. So do we face any obstacle as far as the legal framework is concerned in terms of the Constitution and the various other legal frameworks? So is the hurdle or the obstacle in way of establishing a federal control authority is constitutional, or is it some other thing? Thank you.
Thank you. I also see,
wait for another.
If it's okay, Dr. Saab, can we take maybe 3 or 4 questions, and then we will. Okay. That'll be over to you. So I see Tayyiba Saiba's hand is up. Ji, please.
So I have been following someone on Twitter. It's an agriculture organization in Italy. It's called Coldiretti. What it made me think was that the COVID-19 pandemic has just exposed the loopholes in our systems. So they have identified acetamiprid, which is an insecticide, and tricyclazole, which is a fungicide, in an irregular amount in the rice we have exported to Italy. And this organization, the Coldiretti, has put Pakistani rice on its blacklist 2020. So I was wondering if food safety regulations enforcement in Pakistan, it's a provincial subject. But the SPS agreement requires us to put up systems that, for example, you have mentioned the electronic system for the checks at borders to be regulated by the federal government. So who would be responsible for that? Since this year's Food Day, International Food Day, one sub theme was that from the first step in the supply chain, from the farm to the plate, everyone would be responsible if there comes a food safety issue in the product that we domestically are consuming or is being exported by us to some other country. So please, would you please enlighten that who would be responsible for this loophole or the mistakes that we are making? Thank you.
Thank you indeed. So Dr. Seb, it's over to you, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, constitutionally, federal government is responsible for export, import, and interprovincial trade. The authority or the agency that we proposed when working with the Ministry of Food Security falls under that category. Legislation was drafted. It was even, it had gone all the way to the Parliament, but it had stopped at the committee level at the Parliament because of vested interest groups. And it was not the provinces, because we had discussed this with the provinces as well. And we brought this up. We had consultative meetings. They all understood their roles and who's responsible for what. But it was the institutions within the federal government that did not like this bill because it was curtailing their powers, or they were worried that they would be exposed as being incompetent or not doing their job. So this bill was trashed, very sadly so. Although Bangladesh may be here, India may be here. And as I said, all these CARIC countries are all establishing that. So in terms of the Constitution, there is no constitution blockage. I will even share with you the draft of what we call NAFIS bill. If you want, I'll send it to Dr. Prakat and he can send it, because now, of course, it's in the bin. But it's something that Ministry of Food Security has taken up again. But again, there has been some hurdles that they've refused to collect. I mean, it's a political decision. Egypt has now established a national food safety authority. And it was not until, although I don't advocate dictatorships, it was not until Sisi found out and told the ministry that, look, I need to establish this food safety authority. And they have multiple problems as well, but they established one because there was this political will. What we're lacking is political will and the real, and to tackle this issue at its core to allow us to really be considered as a true nation that complies with not only international laws, but national laws. These regulations are there in our books, but we don't implement them. Now, when it comes to who's responsible, according to the WTO SPS agreement, there's one SPS focal point, and that would be under the federal government because it's import-export. Of course, implementation and enforcement is at the provincial level. So the extension officers and the training and the inspection happens there. But according to the Constitution, the federal government is allowed to go there now and again to do an inspection and audit to make sure that everything being done when it comes to imports and exports and interprovincial trade is within the regulations that are set up by the federal government. So that's why traceability becomes so important. Where did that rice come from that had such high levels of these pesticides? Whether it's a fungicide or insecticide, they're all pests. It's a pesticide. They all comes under that umbrella, and therefore make corrective actions. The corrective actions will be at the provincial level. So if I'm the SPS authority and Ali Abbas gets this alert from Italy and says this rice consignment from this area was rejected, I would then look at where it was sourced from. I would then get in touch with the Department of Agriculture of whichever industry, whichever province it was coming from, and I would say, hey, look, we need to address this. There is a methodology to this madness, which is very clear in terms of addressing non-compliance. So we do not violate, if it's there, we do not violate the Constitution. As a matter of fact, we complement it. We do it in accordance with it. If there is a central authority. मैं आपको ये बताऊं example, sorry. आप EU का example ले लें. मैं समझता हूं कि federal government is the EU and the provinces are its member countries. EU gives the directive, it comes from EU, the DG Sanko, for SPS, whatever the contaminant is or whatever, whether it's pesticide, aflatoxin, heavy metals, whatever, microorganism. Here's the directive. I give it to Punjab, I give it to KP, I give it to Sindh. I say, whatever system you have, you use, but you implement this directive. These are regulations that you have to implement. It's simple, straightforward. It is not complicated. This is not rocket science, although we probably excel at rocket science and we don't excel at this. So I hope I've answered your question.
Sure. In case there are any other questions?
Dr. Vakar, I do have a question.
Please. So Mahnur is from our faculty at STPI. Please.
Yes. So Dr. Kasilbash, thank you so much for quite an insightful presentation that you gave all of us. So my question is about, how COVID-19 is highlighting the interconnectedness of agri-food trade, and leaders globally and organizations are increasingly becoming cognizant of the fact that work needs to be done to mobilize action and, build safe food systems. So bearing that in mind, are any international organizations driving dialogue on food safety standards amid COVID? And are there any training programs available on this subject?
Yes and yes. I mentioned SDDF, World Bank, UNIDO, FAO, not so much WHO because they're looking at more the health, but all these organizations have on their website trainings and awareness building seminars and workshops. But again, as you have rightly said, COVID-19 has only exposed non-compliances. If these non-compliances didn't exist, COVID-19 wouldn't have exposed them. If we had proper controls of our rice going to Italy, where we would have had the proper measures done with good agricultural practice, with good inspection and certification and testing facilities, give consignment that had high level of pesticides, would not have left our ports. But this is where we are lacking in terms of our stringent controls and effective measures of tackling hazards that are harmful for humans, and they're linked with the food, so or food product. So this is where we need to really tighten our laces, roll up our sleeves, and get down and dirty when it comes to addressing these. I mean, as I said, it comes down to a political decision, but. As I, just to answer your question, yes, STDF, कि अभी भी workshops और seminars हो रहे हैं, UNIDO के हो रहे हैं, World Bank के तो हो रहे हैं, FAO के भी हो रहे हैं. But there are other smaller organizations that do that. And when you look at FAO, you can look at the IPPC website. And when you OIE की भी है, when it comes to animal health. So they're there. And there's money there as well to be tapped.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think these resources would be very important. And as DG Saab had also said in the beginning, that they would like to take the capacity building measures in this direction and take forward this endeavor. Of course, today is just the first step basically in this direction, thanks to you. So let me first of all thank you for this very comprehensive discussion and for your openness to take these questions forward. Of course, before we sort of try to have a short summary or maybe even try to close with points for our way forward, I could maybe go back to our colleagues at PITAD for any closing remarks and a vote of thanks.
Uh, Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Sir, I'm Mohammed Umar Riaz, and on behalf of Director General Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development, Director Administration, Director Training, and the fellow members and probationary officers of the Commerce and Trade Group of Civil Service of Pakistan, I would like to extend profound gratitude to Dr. Waqar Ahmed and Dr. Ali Abbas Kazalbash for having such an interactive session with us. Sir, PITAD is persistently striving to train us so that we may get ourselves into a position where we may effectively, robustly, and vigorously deal with the stringent challenges we face in terms of WTO TBT-SPS compliance and the compliance of the other trade agreements. Today's interaction has indeed broadened our horizon. And as Dr. Ali Abbas Kazalbash stated that how he faced resistance at the federal government in transforming his vision of establishing a federal control authority. Sir, let me show you that today you have 22 new students at the federal government. So we wish that we may play our part, however negligible that be, in order to transform your vision into reality. So, sir, thank you very much, Dr. Waqar Ahmed, Dr. Ali Abbas Kazalbash. Looking forward to having more frequent interactions with you in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Up mute and
Thank you very much, Umar Saab. Really appreciate these thoughts. And I think these are in line with what Dr. Kazalbash was also saying in the beginning, that he has been trying to endeavor in this direction for quite some time. And it's good that you will take forward the mission. Just in terms of housekeeping, let me inform you about 3 or 4 things before we close this session. Unless, Dr. Sab, you want to add something.
Oh, no.
Okay.
The thing
So,
is, what I would say, Dr. Waqar, is that subject to my schedule, I am available. I'm confined to Pakistan because of COVID. I should be in Sudan and Kenya, but I cannot go, cannot travel. So if you give me a heads up notice, there's still a lot of stuff that we can discuss and work on. If there are any more questions or anything, you can arrange another meeting, maybe smaller, more focused, whatever fits your needs. And that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this openness. And I think
agriculture could be please involve कर लें किसी तरीके से.
जी ठीक है जी ठीक, well noted जी. And I think the kind of institutional memory that you bring in, it's going to be extremely helpful for our officers. So just in terms of housekeeping before we close, I'm thankful to the faculty at PITAD as well as our senior management at STPI for bringing this together, and of course to Dr. Saab for of course very comprehensive discussion. Now a recording of this meeting will be available for all of you in case you would like to revisit the discussion. We will also request Dr. Saib to share his PowerPoint presentation so that colleagues can look at the resource, as well as I was seeing a lot of references, as well as reference to those various organizations which are providing further capacity on this. We'll have a short transcription from this meeting as well, which will be uploaded on our website. And of course, as Dr. Saab has said, we'll be open in case any bilateral discussion needs to be done for further clarity. So with this, let me thank Madam Rahila Tajwar Saiba for hosting us today and for the attention of all the officers, Dr. Kazalbash for his preparation and for delivering this presentation, and of course to my colleagues at SEDI and STPI teams. Thank you very much, and we will look forward to next possible session in this direction, depending upon, of course, any needs assessment or any immediate need at PITAD. Thank you. Thank you very much.